This isn't your average cartel story. Imagine a man so ruthless he earned the name the Stew Maker by dissolving bodies in acid. That's Santiago Meza Lopez. Then there's Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, who casually takes down military helicopters to send a message. These are 20 of the most feared cartel hitmen who leave fear in their wake without a second thought. Let's get into it. Santiago Meza Lopez. Santiago Meza Lopez, known as El Pozolero, or the Stew Maker, held one of the most grotesque roles within the Tijuana cartel. His job wasn't pulling the trigger, but ensuring that the bodies of the cartel's victims disappeared without a trace. Meza confessed to dissolving over 300 bodies in acid, a gruesome task that earned him his notorious nickname. His method involved using industrial chemicals to liquefy the remains, turning human bodies into sludge that could be easily disposed of, erasing any evidence of the cartel's killings. For years, Meza worked in the shadows, aiding the cartel by making the dead vanish, helping the Tijuana cartel evade law enforcement as they committed murder after murder.
¿Cuánto tiempo estuviste haciendo todo esto?
Como 9, 10 años.
Y en ese tiempo, ¿cuántos cuerpos?
300.
His arrest in 2009 brought an end to his horrific practices, and his confession shocked Mexico. The families of countless missing people finally had a chilling answer as to what happened to their loved ones, though no closure could erase the horror of his actions. Meza was not a cartel leader or a high-ranking figure, but his role in disposing of bodies made him one of the most feared and loathed individuals linked to cartel violence. Even after his arrest, his gruesome legacy as El Pozolero remains a disturbing reminder of the Tijuana cartel's cruelty. As the horrors of Meza's actions fade into history, another figure stepped into the shadows of cartel violence. Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz. Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz, widely known as El Maro, was the leader of the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel, a group infamous for its involvement in fuel theft in central Mexico. His leadership was marked by extreme violence, particularly in his ongoing battle with the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. The feud between the two cartels brought terror to communities caught in the crossfire, with regular reports of executions and kidnappings.
Siempre no voy a rajar bandera con estos hijos de su madre. Todo el puro tiempo le vamos a regar a la verga. De aquí hasta que nos lleve la verga. Aunque me quede solo la verga, aunque me dejen solo como un pinche perro, me les voy a aferrar.
Yepes used fear to maintain his grip on the illegal fuel trade, often making violent examples of those who crossed him. He became notorious for releasing video messages in which he openly taunted rivals and even the government, showing off heavily armed men and boasting of his control. While the CJNG sought to expand its dominance, Yepes fought to hold on to his territory, resulting in some of the most brutal cartel wars in recent years. His cartel's violent actions devastated entire regions, leaving countless victims in their wake. In 2020, after years of bloodshed, Yepes was finally captured by Mexican authorities. His arrest brought an end to his terror, though the scars from the violence he unleashed remain deeply ingrained in the communities he exploited. With Yepes's reign of terror finally over, the brutal tactics of yet another cartel hitman took hold. Miguel Angel Trevino Morales. Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, known by his alias Z40, built his reputation on the back of extreme violence. As one of the most feared leaders of Los Zetas, his reign was marked by terror, both within his cartel and throughout Mexico. Trevino was a hands-on leader, often participating in the brutal acts he ordered. The San Fernando Massacre, where 72 migrants were killed, stands as one of the many horrific events tied to his name. His tactics were straightforward: eliminate anyone who posed a threat, whether they were rivals or members of his own organization. Trevino turned Los Zetas into a cartel feared not just for its drug trade, but for its military-style operations and willingness to commit acts of sheer brutality to maintain power. Under his leadership, violence wasn't just a byproduct, it was a method of control. Even after his capture in 2013, the violent structure he created within Los Zetas persisted, leaving a deep scar across Mexico. Trevino's name became synonymous with fear, and the methods he employed continued to influence cartel warfare long after his arrest. Trevino may have left a scar across Mexico, but the bloodshed continued with his equally ruthless successors. Edgar Valdez Villarreal. Edgar Valdez Villarreal, better known as La Barbie, was an American-born cartel enforcer who rose to prominence within the ranks of the Beltran Leyva cartel. Despite his nickname, Valdez's reputation was anything but soft. He was a central figure in the violent power struggle that erupted after the death of cartel leader Arturo Beltran Leyva, and his method of securing power was built on bloodshed. Valdez orchestrated numerous killings, often using gruesome methods to send a message to both rivals and potential traitors. His Valdez. Cruelty was well documented, with public executions becoming a common occurrence during his time in the cartel. After Arturo's death, Valdez sought control of the organization, plunging it into a violent internal conflict that resulted in dozens of deaths. Mexican authorities eventually captured him in 2010 after a manhunt, and he was extradited to the United States, where he faced charges for his role in drug trafficking and murder. Though behind bars, the damage caused by Valdez's violent rise remains a stark reminder of the deadly power struggles within Mexico's cartels. As Valdez's chapter of violence closed, the next figure brought his own brand of fear to the cartel underworld. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, often referred to as El Mencho, is one of Mexico's most wanted cartel figures, and the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJN. Under his leadership, the CJN quickly rose to become one of the most powerful and violent cartels in Mexico. El Mencho is notorious for escalating violent conflicts with rival groups, particularly during his brutal campaigns to take control of key drug trafficking territories. One of the most shocking displays of his cartel's violent power came in 2015, when CJN gunmen shot down a Mexican military helicopter, killing 9 soldiers. This bold attack on the military made it clear that El Mencho was willing to directly challenge state forces, setting him apart from many other cartel leaders who preferred to avoid open conflict with the government. His cartel is known for using extreme violence, often resorting to public executions and mass killings to maintain control over territories. Despite numerous attempts by Mexican authorities to capture him, El Mencho remains at large, operating from hidden strongholds and continuing to expand his influence. His criminal activities have brought immense suffering to communities across Mexico, and his cartel's violent methods have contributed to an ongoing cycle of bloodshed that shows no signs of slowing down. Even with El Mencho still on the run, the story of the next ruthless cartel leader brought more fear to Mexico. Heriberto Lascano. Heriberto Lascano, also known as El Lasca, was a founding member and leader of Los Zetas, one of Mexico's most feared and violent criminal organizations. Lascano transformed Los Zetas from a paramilitary group into a full-fledged drug cartel, introducing military-style tactics that made them a powerful force in Mexico's underworld. His leadership is closely associated with some of the most gruesome acts of violence ever committed by a cartel. One of the most horrific incidents linked to Lascano was the 2010 San Fernando massacre, in which 72 migrants were brutally killed by Los Zetas. Under Lascano's command, the cartel gained a reputation for extreme cruelty, using terror to control territories and instill fear in both rivals and local populations. Los Zetas' tactics often included kidnappings, extortion, and mass murders, with Lascano at the helm of these operations. Despite his violent legacy, Lascano managed to evade capture for years, becoming one of Mexico's most wanted criminals. His life came to a sudden end in 2012, when Mexican Marines tracked him down and killed him in a shootout. Even after his death, the brutal methods he established for Los Zetas continued, leaving behind a legacy of fear and violence that still echoes today. Lascano's death didn't end the violence, as the next enforcer's brutal methods carried on the cartel's bloody legacy. Raul Meza Ontiveros. Raul Meza Ontiveros, also known as LM6, was a key enforcer for the Sinaloa cartel, serving under Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Ontiveros earned a reputation as a ruthless operative, carrying out assassinations and kidnappings for the cartel. His violent acts were part of the cartel's efforts to maintain control over their territories and protect their drug trafficking routes. Ontiveros was heavily involved in numerous killings over the years, targeting rivals and anyone considered a threat to the cartel. His ability to execute orders without hesitation made him a trusted figure within the organization. However, Ontiveros also played a role in covering up the cartel's violent acts, including helping to hide the brutal murders of 2 women connected to cartel members. His violent career came to an abrupt end in 2007 when he was assassinated, likely the result of internal power struggles within the cartel. Despite his relatively low public profile compared to other figures in the organization, Ontiveros' death was yet another example of the relentless cycle of violence that defines life within Mexico's cartels. His story is a testament to the harsh reality that even the most trusted cartel members can become expendable at any moment. Ontiveros' assassination was just another reminder that in the world of cartels, no one is ever safe, as we'll see with the next figure. Ruben Menes Reyes. Ruben Menes Reyes earned his reputation within the Texas Mexican Mafia, TMM, through sheer brutality. Known for his involvement in multiple executions, Reyes played a pivotal role in ensuring the cartel's internal discipline. His ruthless nature made him the go-to enforcer when it came to eliminating disloyal members or settling disputes with deadly force. One of the most infamous acts linked to Reyes was the execution of Ulises Farias, a fellow TMM member, which sent shockwaves through the organization. This killing, along with several others, highlighted Reyes's brutal approach to maintaining order within the cartel. He was feared not just by rivals, but by members of his own organization, who knew that stepping out of line could result in their own execution. Eventually, Reyes's violent methods caught the attention of law enforcement, and he was arrested for his role in numerous murders. His arrest signaled the end of a bloody chapter in the TMM's history, but the violence he perpetuated continues to haunt the organization. Reyes was a key figure in the internal power struggles of the TMM, demonstrating how violence is often used as a tool for control in criminal organizations. With Reyes's reign over, the cartel violence continued as the next ruthless enforcer took over the spotlight. Jesus Pena Gonzalez. Jesus Pena Gonzalez, also known as L20, was feared for his role as a key enforcer within the Sinaloa cartel. Unlike many of his counterparts, Gonzalez was deeply involved in orchestrating the cartel's violent operations, from high-profile assassinations to internal purges. As one of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's trusted lieutenants, Gonzalez was tasked with handling the cartel's most dangerous conflicts, often resorting to extreme violence to maintain control. His name became associated with bloody turf wars and deadly retributions against rival cartels, as well as brutal enforcement within the Sinaloa ranks. Gonzalez's ability to carry out orders without hesitation made him a feared figure, known for making those who crossed the cartel disappear. In 2014, his violent streak came to an end when Mexican authorities captured him after a long pursuit. His arrest was a significant blow to the Sinaloa cartel, but it did little to stop the ongoing violence that defines the cartel's operations. Gonzalez's fall from power is a reminder of the violent nature of Mexico's cartels, where loyalty is often rewarded with violence, and even the most trusted members can fall victim to the same brutality they enforce. Gonzalez's capture was just another step in the endless war, with more cartel figures waiting in the wings. Ulises Farias. Ulises Farias was a member of the Texas Mexican Mafia, TMM, a criminal organization known for its violent enforcement of internal rules. Farias, like many within the TMM, was heavily involved in criminal activities, including drug trafficking, extortion, and numerous murders. For years, he was considered a loyal soldier within the ranks of the organization, carrying out hits and enforcing cartel rules with ruthless efficiency. However, Farias's loyalty eventually came into question, and he found himself on the wrong side of the TMM's internal power struggles. In 2013, Ruben Menes Reyes, another high-ranking member of the TMM, was ordered to eliminate him. Farias's fall from favor was swift and deadly, as his execution was carried out in typical cartel fashion, serving as a warning to others who might consider betraying the organization. The murder of Farias was a stark reminder of the brutal internal politics that drive groups like the TMM, where even longtime members can quickly become expendable. His death highlights the deadly consequences of falling out of favor in the world of organized crime, where trust is fragile and betrayal is met with swift, violent retribution. Farias's death was just another casualty in the deadly game of cartel loyalty, but the bloodshed didn't stop there. Jerry Spooks Adrogo. Jerry Spooks Adrogo was a key figure within the Texas Mexican Mafia, TMM, known for his involvement in high-profile killings and his willingness to target even those connected to law enforcement. One of the most notorious crimes linked to Adrogo was the murder of Balcones Heights police officer Julian Pacina in 2014. Pacina, who was rumored to have ties to the TMM, was gunned down in cold blood, marking one of the most shocking examples of the cartel's influence reaching into law enforcement. Adrogo's role in the killing of Pacina demonstrated his willingness to eliminate anyone, regardless of their connections, to maintain the cartel's power. His ruthless approach made him a feared figure within the criminal underworld, and his involvement in the assassination of a police officer only increased his notoriety. Adrogo's actions were a testament to the violent and unpredictable nature of cartel enforcers who operate without boundaries in their quest to enforce control. Eventually, Adrogo's criminal activities caught up with him, leading to his arrest and prosecution. His arrest highlighted the deep entanglement between cartel violence and the law enforcement community, and how figures like Adrogo blur the lines between criminality and corruption. Adrogo's arrest put him behind bars, but the violence carried on as another cartel killer rose to power. Edgar Jimenez Lugo. Edgar Jimenez Lugo, shockingly, was just 14 years old when he was arrested for a series of brutal killings linked to the Mexican drug cartels. Nicknamed El Ponchas, Lugo gained notoriety for his involvement in gruesome murders while working for the South Pacific Cartel, a splinter group of the Beltran Leyva cartel. Despite his young age, Lugo admitted to slitting the throats of 4 men, stating that he was paid in both pesos and dollars for his work. His case sent shockwaves through Mexico and the world, not only because of the violence he committed, but also because of his age. Lugo was recruited at a young age, a tactic often used by cartels to exploit vulnerable youth, coercing them into becoming foot soldiers in the bloody drug wars. During his arrest, Lugo showed little remorse, claiming that he was forced to commit the murders and was under constant threat from his cartel handlers. His case highlighted the disturbing trend of children being drawn into cartel violence, used as both killers and victims in a cycle of brutality. In 2011, he was sentenced to 3 years in a juvenile detention center, the maximum sentence allowed under Mexican law for a minor. Lugo's story serves as a grim example of how far cartels will go to corrupt young lives. Lugo's young life in crime shocked the world, but sadly, he wasn't the last young assassin to make headlines. Rosalio Reyda. Rosalio Reyda was a teenage hitman recruited by the notorious Los Zetas cartel, one of Mexico's most violent criminal organizations. At just 13 years old, Reyda was drawn into the deadly world of cartel violence, quickly rising through the ranks as a trusted assassin.
And that was the first time that I had to shoot somebody that very same night.
He was responsible for carrying out multiple killings on behalf of the cartel, admitting to at least 30 murders by the time he was caught. Reyda's cold-blooded efficiency made him a feared figure despite his youth, and his reputation for violence grew as he took on more dangerous assignments. He operated mainly across the US-Mexico border, where he was tasked with eliminating rivals and anyone who stood in the way of Los Zetas. In a chilling confession, Reyda revealed that the cartel's influence ran so deep that it felt like a family to him, despite the horrific acts he was forced to commit. Eventually, law enforcement caught up with Reyda, and he was arrested in the United States. His story, like that of many child assassins, underscores the deep-reaching power of cartels and their ability to manipulate young recruits into committing unspeakable acts of violence. Reyda was sentenced to decades in prison, but his case continues to haunt those affected by cartel violence. Reyda's time as a hitman may have ended, but another killer was still out there making his mark on the world. Jesus Ernesto Chavez Castillo. Jesus Ernesto Chavez Castillo, also known as El Camelo, was a notorious hitman linked to some of the most horrific acts of violence perpetrated by the Juarez cartel. His name became synonymous with bloodshed after his confession of killing over 800 people, an unfathomable number that shocked even those familiar with the brutal world of cartel violence. Castillo's ruthlessness was most evident in one of the most disturbing crimes attributed to him, the killing of a 6-year-old girl who he dismembered with an axe in front of her parents. This horrific act of violence was part of a larger campaign of terror orchestrated by the Juarez cartel, meant to send a message to anyone who opposed them. Castillo's rise within the cartel came from his ability to instill fear through extreme violence, taking part in mass killings and public displays of cruelty. His arrest in 2010 marked the end of his bloody career, but the scars left by his actions remain in the communities terrorized by his reign. Castillo's story highlights the depths of brutality that cartels can reach in their quest for power, using fear and horror to maintain control over territories and populations. Castillo's horrifying crimes left scars that won't heal, but the cartels kept moving forward with new leaders. Eduardo Ravelo. Eduardo Ravelo, a leader within the Barrio Azteca gang, was one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives for years, linked to a string of brutal murders and organized crime activities across the US-Mexico border. Ravelo's criminal operations were closely tied to the Juarez cartel, with his gang serving as the cartel's enforcers in Ciudad Juarez, one of the most violent cities in Mexico. He was implicated in orchestrating numerous killings, including the brutal murder of 3 US consulate employees in 2010. Ravelo's role as a cartel enforcer extended beyond simple hits. He was deeply involved in trafficking drugs, extorting businesses, and maintaining control over key territories through sheer violence. His ability to evade capture for so long made him a notorious figure in both Mexico and the United States. Ravelo's gang operated with military precision, often carrying out coordinated attacks on rivals and civilians alike, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. His eventual capture in 2018 brought some relief to the communities that suffered under his violent reign, but his legacy of fear and destruction lingers, a testament to the ruthless power he wielded during his time as one of the Juarez cartel's most feared operatives. Ravelo's capture was a small victory for the authorities, but more dangerous men remained at large. José Rodolfo Escaleda. Feared for his brutality, José Rodolfo Escaleda was a prominent figure in the Juarez cartel, overseeing much of the violence in northern Mexico. Escaleda was instrumental in enforcing the cartel's dominance over key drug trafficking routes, often through mass killings and other acts of terror. One of the most chilling examples of his ruthlessness was the massacre of 15 people in Creel in 2008, a bloodbath designed to send a message to rivals and local communities alike. His methods didn't just involve killings. Escaleda's violent tactics also displaced thousands of families, forcing entire communities to flee the cartel's grasp. Despite the terror he unleashed, Escaleda was able to operate with impunity for years, shielded by corrupt officials who turned a blind eye to his actions. His eventual arrest in 2009 marked a significant victory for law enforcement, but by then, the damage had been done. The trail of violence he left behind had already deeply scarred the communities under his control. Even with Escaleda behind bars, the ripple effects of his brutal leadership continued to affect the region, exemplifying the long-lasting consequences of cartel violence. Escaleda's downfall brought some relief, but his violent influence continued to haunt the region. Jaime Gonzalez Duran. Jaime Gonzalez Duran, better known by his alias El Hummer, used his military training to become one of the founding members of Los Zetas, one of Mexico's most violent and feared cartels. Before turning to a life of crime, Gonzalez Duran was part of the Mexican Army's elite forces, where he honed the skills that would later make him a deadly enforcer in the cartel world. Under his leadership, Los Zetas developed a reputation for using military tactics in their operations, making them a particularly dangerous and disciplined organization. Gonzalez Duran was involved in a number of high-profile assassinations, including the killing of Valentin Elizalde, a famous narco-corrido singer, in 2006. The murder sent shockwaves through Mexico and further solidified Los Zetas' fearsome reputation. Gonzalez Duran's military background allowed him to bring a new level of sophistication to cartel violence, using his strategic thinking to help Los Zetas expand their control over key drug routes. His eventual capture in 2008 dealt a significant blow to the cartel, but the tactics he introduced continued to shape Los Zetas' operations for years after his arrest, cementing his legacy as one of the most dangerous figures in Mexico's cartel history. Gonzalez Duran's arrest may have taken him off the streets, but the brutal strategies he brought to the cartel still lived on. Antonio Acosta Hernandez. Antonio Acosta Hernandez, also known as El Diego, was a key figure within La Línea, the armed wing of the Juarez cartel. Acosta Hernandez played a significant role in the brutal insert-a-image turf wars between the Juarez cartel and the Sinaloa cartel, orchestrating numerous killings as part of the fight to control drug trafficking routes. He was implicated in a string of violent acts, including the massacre of 15 people in Ciudad Juarez in 2010, an event that shocked the nation. The victims, mostly teenagers, were gunned down at a birthday party, an incident that exemplified the indiscriminate violence Acosta Hernandez brought to the region. His tactics were designed to instill fear, not only among rivals, but also within local communities, who often found themselves caught in the crossfire. Acosta Hernandez was also linked to attacks on U.S. consulate employees in 2010, further highlighting his disregard for any boundaries in his pursuit of power. His violent reign came to an end in 2011, when Mexican authorities arrested him, marking a significant blow to La Línea and the Juarez cartel. However, the damage Acosta Hernandez caused continues to haunt the region, with many families still mourning the loss of loved ones due to his ruthless campaign of violence. Acosta Hernandez's capture didn't bring an end to the bloodshed, as the cartel wars raged on. Julio Santana. For 35 years, Julio Santana was a silent force in the world of contract killings. His name was rarely whispered outside criminal circles, despite the nearly 500 murders he claimed to have committed. Operating from deep within Brazil, Santana treated his deadly work with the precision of a craftsman. He wasn't a headline seeker or a cartel warlord. Instead, he worked quietly, methodically, and with chilling detachment. His assignments came from various factions, including organized crime syndicates and drug cartels, yet Santana remained an enigma, carefully staying out of the public eye. What made him stand out was his ability to evade capture and operate with near impunity for decades, using a mix of caution and his deep understanding of human nature to stay ahead of the law. His secret life as a hitman only came to light after years of evasion, thanks to an investigative journalist who uncovered the true extent of Santana's grisly career. His tale serves as a grim reminder that some of the most dangerous killers are the ones who blend in, quietly leaving a trail of bodies while the world remains unaware. Santana's career as a hitman may have been quiet, but the ripple effects of his deadly work were anything but small. Benjamin Valeriano. Last on our list, Benjamin Valeriano was a lesser-known figure compared to the high-profile leaders of Mexico's most infamous cartels, but his violent actions left a deep impact on those who crossed his path. Valeriano was heavily involved in various criminal activities, including murder and kidnapping, operating within the chaotic world of cartel violence. What set him apart, however, was his notorious reputation for mistreating his own family members, an act that would ultimately lead to his downfall. In 2007, after authorities discovered that Valeriano had been mistreating his wife and chasing her down in a public altercation, he was arrested and charged with murder. The incident shined a light on the internal violence that often goes unnoticed in the world of organized crime, where personal relationships are as volatile as cartel feuds. Valeriano's capture was not the result of a massive manhunt or a high-profile sting operation. Rather, it was the domestic violence case that brought him to justice. His story highlights the unpredictable nature of cartel members, who often become victims of their own violent tendencies. Despite his relatively low profile, Valeriano's arrest was another reminder of how deep cartel violence runs, not only affecting rivals and outsiders, but also seeping into personal lives. That's a wrap for this video. If you're hooked on more gripping cartel tales, click on the screen for your next dose. See you in the next video.